What is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of F1 Fantasy Pole Position. It is Tuesday, March 25th. My name is Ewan. On today's episode, we're going to go over the ultimate budget building guide. How do we gain budget in F1 Fantasy? It has been a very hot topic in the F1 Fantasy community. Before we get the episode started, I want to give a huge shout out to the F1 Fantasy Tools Discord because they have been so helpful and like the ultimate resource when it comes to any of this stuff. If you've watched the previous episodes, you might notice that there's a change here to my right-hand side. Fred Vasseur, he's out of here. You don't get a double disqualification and remain on the pit wall at F1 Fantasy Pole Position. So Ayo Komatsu, come on down. Double points finish for Haas. So yeah, we can change these up. Let me know in the comments below who you want to see maybe on the next episode, like who you think deserves to be on the pit wall for the intro slide. But we are going to get right into it here with the budget building guide. So there's going to be three topics I cover today. What is the pricing algorithm? How do we grow budget? And then drivers and constructors to target and avoid. And we'll also be going on to the F1 Fantasy Tools website to discuss their budget building tool because it is grade A fantastic as per usual. As you can see here, qualifying or the next lineup block isn't until Saturday, April 5th for the Japanese Grand Prix. I did better. My journey to 1000K is back on, cut the rank almost by 430. Yeah, about 430,000. So yeah, it was a good weekend. But go check out my Chinese Grand Prix review stream and then the emergency Chinese Grand Prix disqualifications live stream. I came back on after that when we got the announcement that Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, and Pierre Gasly were all disqualified from the Chinese Grand Prix, so definitely go check that out. But what is the pricing algorithm? Well, it determines how assets rise and fall in price each Grand Prix, and as we found out this weekend, the algorithm is changing and is now definitely unconfirmed. We thought we kind of had a lock on it, but we've figured out some stuff. The F1 Fantasy Tools community has figured out some stuff as well. And we're trying to figure out different thresholds is there a different threshold for a regular weekend versus a sprint weekend? Are they growing the thresholds? That is what we are still figuring out. So while this is the ultimate budget building guide, it is subject to change. So we will go with that as well. So what is the pricing algorithm in Australia? We went through this. It was 0.4 for a great performance, 0.3 to 0.4 points per million for a good performance where you would gain budget. Poor was 0.2 to 0.3 and terrible was less than 0.2. And the pricing algorithm was race 1 points plus race 2 points plus race 3 points divided by 3 times the asset price. And there was a lot of discussion in the community like, this is going to lead to like huge inflation after the third race of the season. Well, bam, in China, they switched it up on us. And yeah, so now it was 0.8 for a great result, 0.6 to 0.8 for a good result. Poor result was 0.4 to 0.6 and terrible was less than 0.4. So some of us got caught out there and yours truly also got caught out because I was banging the drum all week. Kimi Antonelli, this is the last 2 races you're going to be able to get the 0.6 price rise. And I was wrong, which sucks. So if you followed my advice and you went with Kimi Antonelli, I apologize for that. Unfortunately, the information was unknown, and I hope I made that clear enough, but that's what we were dealing with at the time. But it seems like the B tier is now actually up to 19 million, not 20 million like previously thought. So when Kimi Antonelli this weekend at the Chinese Grand Prix was 19 million, he got over the threshold, but he actually only went up 0.3 million because of his great performance, which was quite lucky considering he got driver of the day out of nowhere. He maybe could have only gone up 0.1. What does this mean for the Japanese Grand Prix moving forward? I will discuss that in my team selection video next week, but right now, just a quick little cliff notes is it makes Oscar Piastri a much bigger priority to get back into my F1 fantasy team as we go ahead to the Japanese Grand Prix. But yeah, so they switched it up for us on the Chinese Grand Prix pricing algorithm. So what does that mean for Japan? Well, right now, the kind of leading theory is that it's going to go up again. So the great is going to be worth 1 point, or you're going to have to score 1.2 points per million. Good is 0.9 to 1.2 points per million. Poor is 0.6 to 0.9 points per million. And terrible is less than 0.6 points per million. So it'll be Australia plus China plus Japan, all those points added up, and then you divide that by 3 times your asset price. So Kimi Antonelli is now he's 19.3 million, so he times that by 3, and he'll have to get over 1.2 points per million at that price to get another 0.3 price increase. So that is what we are kind of working with so far in the pricing department. So each race has changed. This is the theory based on some dummy data. However, it could be that this Chinese Grand Prix over here, that is the formula for a sprint weekend. And then we could go back to the Australia where it's just a Grand Prix weekend. But like after Japan, we should have a pretty firm grasp on how the pricing algorithm is going, because I'll have all 3 races, and yeah, we'll see if 1.2, if this is the final pricing algorithm here in the middle. So great performance will have to be 1.2, 0.9 to 1.2, 0.6 to 0.9 is poor, and then less than 0.6 is terrible. But how do we grow budget, I hear you cry out through the YouTube screen? Well, we want to identify drivers with easy to achieve points per million thresholds. That's what we were doing last week when we were building the wild card. We want to use our free transfers and the wild card to build budget earlier in the season, because then we can afford those more expensive assets later on in the season. The theory would be like B tier assets grow at a 0.6 million rate, while the A tier assets are only growing at 0.3. So right now, what we want is to get those easy 0.6 rises in our F1 team, and then eventually we will flip those over into getting cheaper B tier assets, but that will give us the budget to go up and get some A tier assets. That's why I've got Fernando Alonso right here, because he has fallen in price 2 weeks in a row, 0.6 million. He's going to keep falling, at least for the Japanese Grand Prix, probably for the Bahrain Grand Prix as well, because he's going to have those DNFs attached to his name. If he can get a couple of clean races going here, if he can keep it clean all the way through Saudi Arabia, once we get to Miami, Fernando Alonso is probably going to be about like 5.5-ish million, somewhere in there, and he's going to be a tremendous value. So if you've had Nico Hülkenberg or Esteban Ocon or something like that, you can flip Nico Hülkenberg, who will probably be about 8.2, 7.6 million, just kind of depending on how he goes up and down based on the next few Grand Prix. And you have Fernando Alonso there at 5.5 million. You'll be able to flip him, and that'll bank your 2 million, and that can upgrade you from like a George Russell up to a Oscar Piastri or a Kimi Antonelli up to a George Russell, that kind of thing. So, and then the other thing we want to do to how do we grow budget is to avoid those drivers with recent DNFs. So how did we do that? So this is my squad that I had in Australia here. It scored 52 points. It lost 1.8 million in budget. Oscar Piastri, Carlos Sainz, Gabriel Bortoleto, Isaac Hadjar, Esteban Ocon, McLaren, and Williams. So when all the data came out, F1 Fantasy Tools, once again, their Discord is a fantastic resource. You have to get on there. If you haven't signed up yet, you can use their Patreon product, their premium product, and you can use promo code UN50 for 50% off your first month. With a triple header coming up, I think that would be quite handy for you guys. So yeah, use that code if you want to sign up for their premium product. So after the Chinese Grand Prix, we looked at all the data. F1 Fantasy Tools put together a fantastic spreadsheet that we're going to go over, or it's actually on their website, a fantastic tool that we're going to go over in a little bit here. But these were all the predicted risers and fallers for the Chinese Grand Prix. So I was looking at this heading into the Chinese Grand Prix, a sprint weekend. So I had Piastri, Ocon, McLaren, and Williams, who were all expected to rise, but Sainz, Bortoleto, and Hadjar were almost guaranteed of falling 0.6 million. This is based on the previous assumption with the algorithm, which did come true for that week. And this is pretty much how it went down. Yeah, Piastri rose, Sainz fell, Bortoleto fell, Hadjar fell, Ocon rose, McLaren rose, and Williams rose. So that was really handy. So I ended up activating my wild card, and I was trying to bring in as many price risers as I possibly could. Now, this new pricing algorithm that we discovered after the Chinese Grand Prix did bite me a tiny bit, because I got Antonelli at 0.3, Albon at 0.2, but then Stroll, Hulkenberg, Ocon, and Williams all rose 0.6, and McLaren rose 0.3. Captain Hindsight would obviously have told me that it would have been a better play to go with Piastri and Haas, because that would have scored me more points and gained the same amount of budget, but I was working on the previous assumptions. So hopefully you guys don't hold that against me for any of the previous advice that I gave there. But yeah, it was a successful wildcard. I gained a bunch in budget. I went from 98.2 million, as you can see here, to 101.4. So I gained 3.2 million on the wildcard. Successful, if you ask me. And I've got some pretty strong risers heading into the Japanese Grand Prix as well. But like I said, we are going to get into that in just a little bit. If you don't have time for the entire episode, remember, there's always timestamps in the description below, and hit that like. And if you haven't yet, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. We just went over 2,300 subscribers. So thank you everyone to support, but let's get to 2,500 during this triple header. That would be the goal, because yeah, that would be fantastic. So check that out if you would like more F1 Fantasy content coming out of F1 Fantasy Pole Position. Moving over here to some of the drivers, like how do we grow budget? So this is what I labeled as the problem children in last week's team selection for the Chinese Grand Prix. So on the columns here, I've got their Australian Grand Prix score, how much they fell in price, and then their Chinese Grand Prix score, and then still how much they fell in price. So the 6 drivers we talked about last week were Lawson, Sainz, Alonso, Doohan, Hadjar, and Bortoleto. As you can see here, they all scored at least negative 17 points in the Australian Grand Prix, and they promptly all fell 0.6 million. And then we were looking at their Chinese Grand Prix score, how they were supposed to get to these certain thresholds to avoid the rises or the falls again, and no one made it. Lawson even scored 22 points, and he still fell 0.6 million. Sainz scored 8, Alonso negative 17, Doohan, Hadjar with 11, and Bortoleto with 7. They all still fell 0.6 million. So we can predict this stuff with the pricing algorithm. The rises were a little off, but the falls were pretty much 100% accurate. So this is where we need to kind of think ahead, like which drivers do we have in our teams? If we have any of these drivers in our squads for the Japanese Grand Prix, they are likely still to fall. Again, Lawson maybe doesn't need as much of a heroic performance, but like I said, we're going to get into that in a little bit. But yeah, Alonso's going to keep falling for a couple of races here because 2 DNFs, you got to get those off of your 3-race rolling average is what the game is calculating it by, and then he should shoot back up in value. So we will go with that there. So yeah, these 6 drivers, if you have any of them in your team, I would try to think about maybe getting them out for the Japanese Grand Prix. However, it could be an interesting thought for the Bahrain Grand Prix immediately afterwards. So going over to assets to target and avoid, and Skazaka on the F1 Fantasy Tools Discord put together this fantastic graphic. So shout out to Amidio for letting me use this in my episode. Really appreciate it, sir. Thank you very much. And as you can see here, the Japanese Grand Prix kind of pricing changes. He's got all the A tiers, the B tiers, and like this is also all on the F1 Fantasy Tools budget building website now. They've updated it, but I just want to give a shout out to Skazaka for this fantastic work. It's also quite pretty to look at. It's all very like colorful and stuff like that. So as you can see here, A tier, B tier split up. If it goes below 0.6 million or points per million, you're going to lose 0.3 as an A tier asset, 0.6 as a B tier asset, and all that fun stuff. We're going to zoom in on each of these, so don't worry here. You don't have to take a screenshot of this here. So drivers to target / avoid in the A tier. As you can see here, like Norris needs to score just more than 7 points for another price rise. But Verstappen, Leclerc, Hamilton, those guys, if you have them in your team, this is an opportunity to maybe move down to a Piastri. As you can see here, Piastri, Russell, and Antonelli only need 28, 18, and 9 points respectively to go into a great price rise, which will be 0.3 for them. Right now I have Antonelli, and I mentioned this at the top of the episode, but now that Antonelli is an A-tier asset and is only rising the same as Oscar Piastri, there's really no need to have Antonelli in your team if you can get up to Piastri. Now, my plan all along was to be able to just use one free transfer in Japan and then roll another one into Bahrain so I could have 3 free transfers and then just take a 10-point hit to use 4 free transfers if I need to get on some more price rising options heading into Bahrain. However, with Piastri just like scoring points all over the map right now, like it is a points disadvantage to be with Antonelli over Piastri. I could still stick with my 1 free transfer rolling kind of thing, but I don't have enough budget to go straight from Antonelli to Piastri. So I'm going to have to think about that over the next week, and I'll get back to you guys on the team selection here. But as you can see, like Hamilton and Leclerc are both going to have to score 45 and 39 points at the Japanese Grand Prix to avoid a 0.3 price fall. Leclerc has now fallen 0.3 in back-to-back races. So he's going to be a little coming into our thoughts here a little bit. Like once those negative scores get off of his radar as well after the disqualification at the Chinese Grand Prix, Leclerc could be a bang up asset to kind of build some more value with, maybe score some easy points, could be a differential option over like the McLaren template that seems to be forming as well. But as you can see here, like Piastri, Russell, Antonelli, Norris, Verstappen, they all need to score negative points to even get close to a terrible price rise or price fall. So all the A tier assets are pretty safe here. It gets more interesting when we move over to the B tier assets, as you can see. So Albon and now he's had back-to-back, or he's had a 0.6 and a 0.2 price rise. He now needs to score 19 points at the Japanese Grand Prix to go up another 0.6 million, which is a lot for a B tier asset. He has scored points in back-to-back Grand Prix, like in the World Drivers' Championship, but 19 points is still quite a lot. He'd have to probably qualify in Q3 again and then get some overtakes and stuff like that. But there are other options that we can look at here in the B tier range, like Lance Stroll only needs to score 1 point. Esteban Ocon just needs to avoid negative points. Nico Hulkenberg, 6 points. Behrman, 3 points. But everyone else is kind of a little bit sketchier. Like Sainz, Lawson, Gasly, they all need to score at least 45 points. Alonso needs to score 64 points to even get to the max price range. But then on the falling side here, on the far right-hand column, that's what you have to look at as well. Because as much as we want to grow budget, we also need to avoid losing budget. So Lawson needs to score at least 25 points. We'll see if he's even in that Red Bull car to score 25 points. Albon, he can score negative points to avoid a rise. Sainz has scored at least 32 points to avoid another price hit. Gasly, 26. Stroll can pretty much get a DNF and like still maybe cling on to just a 0.2 price fall. So that's interesting as well. Another reason to probably keep Lance Stroll. Sonoda could get, like, as you can see here, like Bortoleto needs to score 19, Hadjar 17, Doohan 19. Behrman there at 3 points for a 0.6 price rise as well. That is a very tempting option for me to kind of maybe just go from Albon to Behrman. And then that would give me enough money to go from Antonelli to Piastri. So that's something in my thinking, but I do want to keep 1 free transfer. But like I said, it's going to come down to it here. So those are the B tier drivers there. Moving over here to the constructors finally. Once again, thanks to Skazaka for getting this. Amidio, thank you for letting me share this very pretty table on my YouTube channel. So shout out to them. McLaren, Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes. As you can see, Ferrari's going to have to score 85 points to get a max price rise. They're going to have to score 35 points to avoid a 0.3 price fall. So I'd probably say that Ferrari is a chance of a good price rise, 0.1 at the Japanese Grand Prix. But McLaren would need double DNFs to avoid a 0.3. Same with Mercedes. So if you have either of those two constructors, you can feel pretty good that they're just going to keep growing budget for the time being. Williams needs to get 13 points. Haas needs to avoid a double DNF to get a 0.6 price rise as well. So they are kind of also a priority transfer for me. Like, there's a world where I either end up at the Japanese Grand Prix using 1 free transfer or taking a hit. Like, it's going to be pretty confusing, and it's going to be quite a big decision for my F1 fantasy team here. But yeah, Williams, Haas, Racing Bulls, maybe Kick Sauber. Those would be the B tier assets that are looking at great price rise. Kick Sauber, I'm not sure I can feel super confident in. We'll see how the practices go at the Japanese Grand Prix. But Williams, Haas, yeah, those guys are pretty good. Racing Bulls as well. Like if Williams get both drivers into Q3, like that's 10 points. So you'd feel pretty good about them getting another 0.6 price rise heading into the Japanese Grand Prix. But yeah, all of these constructors are great targets. McLaren, Mercedes are safe as well. Red Bull's probably pretty safe. Williams, Haas, and Racing Bulls should be on our mind. But now let's just go check out the F1 Fantasy Tools budget building tool. All right, everyone, here is the F1 Fantasy Tools budget builder tool. Fantastic resource. Like I said earlier in the episode, if you have not signed up yet, 50% off your first month with promo code UN50. And this is pretty much the same tables I was showing you here, but if you sign up for their premium product, you can just add your own team in and they do it all for you. Look, it highlights my T1 team here: Antonelli, Ocon, Stroll, Hülkenberg, Albon. All of these assets here, like what they have to score, how they're looking. So right now, I'm sitting okay. Like Antonelli 9, Ocon -2, Stroll 1, Hülkenberg 6, Albon 19. Albon is probably the biggest problem I have to deal with in the driver department. But then even moving down here, Williams 13, McLaren -61. They are going to go up again as well. So there are options, but like this is what I'm saying, like you can add in, they have required points, they have required points per million, like what everyone's going to need from each race, just for Japan as well. Like this is so handy, and it's so easy to just like look this up, hook up your team here. Like this has my second team with Antonelli and Piastri, has my third team. I think you can even add a manual team at some point. I just haven't found that option, or maybe that's only in the live scoring. But look at all these tools over here: team calculator, budget building, live scoring, season summary, elite data, statistics, team analyzer, league analyzer, all coming soon. But like they say here at the top, this data is based on a yet to be verified new pricing algorithm for the 2025 season. There could therefore be inaccurate. User discretion is advised. So while we are still going to be working with, and that's the assumption I'm going to be working with for the Japanese Grand Prix, is that it is that new tier and stuff like that. Just got to be a little bit careful. Maybe I put too many of my eggs in the basket with F1 Fantasy Tools there, or not F1 Fantasy Tools, but just the pricing algorithm in general, which was fantastic work. But yeah, we just didn't really anticipate the change coming. But I think it's going to be good for the long term of the game. So hopefully it all works out there. But yeah, like T1 team, or I can just take it off. We've got all the price risers here. So this is really a handy tool immediately. f1fantasytools.com/budget-builder to kind of just have a quick glance of maybe the assets you should be targeting. Maybe you're on wildcard for Japan. Maybe it just went all pear-shaped in Australia and China. This is a great tool on where to kind of look at what assets to target for your Japanese Grand Prix lineup. So as we wrap up the Ultimate Budget Building Guide episode here, there are just a few questions I think we have to keep in mind as we move forward in the season. Like, are there going to be more changes to the points per million threshold as we move forward? Like, are they going to have different thresholds for a sprint weekend versus a non-sprint weekend? These are maybe things that we just need to have like in the back of our mind when we're making our transfers until we get 100% confirmation. Maybe we won't even know until the second sprint in Miami. Maybe the pricing algorithm changes for a sprint, even though it's stabilized over the next 3 Grand Prix. And then where are the tier cutoffs? That'd be the final question. So Antonelli started the season at 18.4. He rose 18.6. And then when he was at 19 million, he only went up 0.3. That doesn't necessarily mean that the tier cutoff is at 19 million. It could be 18.5, could be 18.6, 7, 8, 9, that sort of stuff. So there are still some unanswered questions that we have in F1 Fantasy, and it's just something that I think we need to have in the back of our brain as we move into the next 22 races of this 24 race season. But that's going to do it for the ultimate budget building guide episode for the 2025 F1 fantasy season. If we learn some more, I'll probably update this as we go throughout this season. There'll be some updates. Maybe we'll get some changes. There'll be new drivers to target, that sort of stuff. But since we don't have a race week, I want to kind of get a guide out there. But there'll also be one more episode this week. I'm doing a F1 fantasy 2-week overreactions episode with Zach from the Fantasy Formula and FanAmp, so super excited for that. I've got some overreactions ready to go, so we'll be grading your overreactions on the episode. But like I said, if you haven't yet, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the like button on the video. Would greatly appreciate that. Any support is welcome. The goal is 2,500 subscribers by the end of the triple header, so hopefully we can get to that. But hopefully you guys are enjoying your week off. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. But once again, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you next time.